So can we talk a little bit about the premise of the film and how it came about and how you brought the cast together?
Sure. So the premise of the film is two young guys who work as valet parkers at an upscale restaurant have come up with a little scam. They've realized that when people hand them their car keys, they usually also hand them the keys to their house. And so they look at the registration, and if they live near enough to the restaurant, they figured they could get into the house before dinner's over.
Right.
And so these are not like sophisticated criminals. They're not wiping houses out. They're not wiping people's lives out. They're taking things that people then say, where did I put my watch, or where did I put my cash? So it's a small time scam, and they've been doing this for a while. And this is
like
their
the most amount of thinking, isn't it? They will just steal small things so that the restaurant won't get recorded.
Exactly. But one day they break into the house of someone they shouldn't have, and there are immense consequences for having robbed the wrong house.
Yeah. What he said.
And sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
If you yourself were in Sean's situation, what do you think that you would do? If you saw the girl,
I probably would have done a similar to Sean, because I think that's what for the few people who have seen the film, it's been really lovely, because the reports are that they identify with the moment that causes Sean such despair. It's the moment where he leaves this girl, abandons her essentially, fails to save her, and is deeply despaired, is stricken with remorse for the rest of the film and has to undo that moment. And I think he was looking death in the face. That's how we played it. That's how we told that moment in the story. So, and I think I would defy anyone not to wimp out. I certainly would.
The script was written by Brandon Boyce. He spec'd the script on his own, and he had written Apt Pupil and Wicker Park. And he showed me the script early on just to give him advice on the script, and my advice was don't show it to anyone else because I'm buying it right now.
It's interesting that he's just Apt Pupil and Bad Samaritan have such similar themes, horror down the road in your own neighborhood.
And a horror that I think is more based on real horror in real life as opposed to movie fantasy horror.
Yeah.
So would you say, what was the choices in casting an actor like David Tennant and an actor like Robert? What were you looking for in those actors for those characters?
I think that more and more there's a tendency in Hollywood to cast based on either fame or Twitter followers or work, that's not related to the movie. And I think it's hurting our film industry. And I set out on day one, I said, I'm going to cast this with the best actors who are right for these parts. And I didn't know if I'd get them, but I figured I would get on my knees and beg.
But they turned it down, so then he called me.
Actually, I was a huge fan from his series Misfits.
Same.
And I asked him if he would be in this film I made called Geostorm. And we just got along famously. And I was so impressed with him that I actually had Brandon rewrite the part for him because I couldn't see anyone else in the part other than him. And so the whole time we're making the movie, I kept bugging about it, saying, read this script. Luckily he said yes. And Tennant, it's no secret that I'm a giant Doctor Who fan. And he's just one of my favorites in the world. And luckily, he agreed to have this Skype call with me. And I embarrassed myself because I started fanboying over the entire Skype call. And of course, I really embarrassed myself because I was wearing a Doctor Who t-shirt, and he pointed out that I had the logo for the Matt Smith Doctor Who, not his. So I definitely had a Who faux pas. But he forgave me and he did the movie anyway.
My agent, Rose, in London, she went to a screening of Bad Samaritan just recently with David, who was like fangirling massively. I'm sorry, it's just going to be the two of us.
And there was lots of action-packed scenes that we saw in the trailer for the first time today. Without teasing anything too much, can you name what was most difficult for you to direct or for you to act in?
Well, I think sometimes logistical constraints can make it difficult. Things like nights, You know, it can really wear you down. I mean, I think it contributed to the exhaustion of Sean, the character I was playing. You know, to see the, you know, we lived like vampires for a good half the shoot at least. You know? So that type of thing really, you know, the physical stuff is exhausting, but I really like that, you know, because it takes your headspace and puts you somewhere else, you know. But I think the intensity of the scenes between myself and David, which I won't tell you much about, but those were really difficult, you know, because
Very intense.
really intense, and I think you come out of it just exhausted on so many levels. You know.
And on top of it, we didn't plan on it, but we were hit with 5 snowstorms during the shoot, which actually worked out great in the film, but it made some of these action sequences that much more difficult because you're in a blizzard trying to shoot very intense acting scenes. And it's a real tribute to both my actors in that they literally were standing in a blizzard acting their asses off.
And it's like we had snow days. We had like days where we just sat at home staring out the window. Oh, it doesn't look like it's clearing up anytime soon. You know, it's a testament to the fact that I'm in the right business that I didn't go, yeah, we have a snow day. I was like, oh. You know, because when I was in school, I loved snow days.
Robert, so I've seen most of your filmography. You've done some very serious stuff, but I think that what endears people most to you is your like unique comedic charm.
Oh, thanks very much.
This movie is very different from some of that. Can you talk about sort of what playing comedy brought to playing such a serious sort of horror role, if that helped at all?
Well, there was a few moments in the film where, you know, we had ideas of just, even though Sean is going through this horrible traumatic thing, there's a few moments of like joking around with his best friend, who Carlito Olivero plays, and I think that's the thing about comedy and comedic moments is they can be found anywhere. You know, they can be found in the deepest, darkest of corners, and you know, so there are a few moments where he sort of steals a smile or a giggle in this, and I think that's probably because I just sort of naturally gravitate back that way anyway. You know what I mean? And this is something where the intensity is just perpetual, you know, unending. So it was nice to just have a tiny few little snippets of moments in there that were lighter, I suppose.
You actually end up needing it because there's sequences that are so intense. It's like, if I don't laugh soon, I'm going to cry. So something better make me laugh.
Yeah, you sort of shut your eyes. You know.
How long was the shoot? Was it all in Portland?
It was all in Portland. It was a very short shoot. I think we did it in 38 days. It was originally supposed to be 32 days, but then the snowstorms hit. But yeah, it was a very short shoot. So it was a lot of long days. But the crew up there, we've been working with the same crew for basically 8 years, and I am more proud of that group of people than any group I've ever worked with in my life. These guys were just amazing. When on one of the days we were staying in this terrible motel, and this horrible snowstorm happened while we were asleep, and we went out in the morning to go to our cars to drive, and the Teamsters had shown up 2 hours early before they were paid, and they cleaned everybody's car off so that it would be safe to drive. And I thought, where else does that happen? Yeah. You know, these people, they just cared about each other, and they worked together as a unit that was way beyond what we paid for.
There was a morning about 6 a.m. It was still dark, and we were heading up to the location up the mountain, and we were in an SUV, and there were a couple of cars had stopped on the road. It was quite a steep road, and one car was just visibly sliding like back down the hill and was headed for the gully beside the road, and I got out and I was like, oh God, I was in a panic on the road going, what are we going to do? And like all these cars were stopped. It was like the end of the world or something. I remember texting one of the producers going, what are we going to do? This can't go on. And then that morning, like in a panic, I said, should we cancel? And he ignored the text message entirely. It's like, I didn't see that word. I didn't see that text message. But, you know, and then the crew got together and they pulled cars out of the ditch, cars that had slid off, you know, because The cars were just normal cars. They weren't equipped for icy, steep roads at mountainous locations. They did amazing stuff to get the film done.
Were there any personal experiences that you kind of incorporated into your preparation for the role?
I mean, they're always kind of, they talk about the idea of sense memory, things that you remember to make you feel miserable. And they're usually... I tend to try to not do that, but end up doing it to some degree. And you end up feeling quite guilty and remorseful for having done it, because you feel like somehow you're exploiting your past, for a pretense, and that can be difficult, because you start to, it's difficult when you play with your memories like that, because it's always very, very deeply personal stuff, painful stuff. And when you apply that onto something else, you are changing the imprint of that memory to some degree. Yeah. It's a dangerous game to play, but we actors, we do it because we have to try and find it somewhere, And I always feel a bit bad about that. I remember years ago, a friend of mine, actress, her brother died of cancer when he was like 12, and she was on stage, and she said she used that, but she said she was desperately guilty for months after having done it, because she felt somehow she was, being disrespectful to the memory of her brother. But I think I did it a little bit on this, because there were moments in this film of great intensity, and you don't want to come up short.
There was a moment before we started shooting when we were in prep, and Robert and I were going over the script and just discussing it and working our way through it. And together we discovered that really the pivotal moment is his decision to not help this girl and what it does to him. And we talked about it in terms of an enormously embarrassing moment for a person. In other words, everything he thought he was becomes a lie in that moment. And what Robert did is something I don't see with a lot of actors. He did a completely egoless performance. So when this moment came, he allowed himself to be vulnerable in a way that a lot of actors wouldn't have the courage to do. And this drove the whole rest of the film, because he's so embarrassed about that moment that he needs to erase it from his life, even if it means costing his life, because he can't live with that moment being the defining moment of his life. And I've had situations like this in the past where you want to go that deep, but the actor gets worried, well, am I going to look good, or people are going to judge me? And he never thinks in terms of that. He thinks in terms of the character, what is going on to that character. And he throws himself so deeply into it that as a director, I had a big problem, because I would forget to say cut, because I would literally just be watching going, ooh, what's going to happen next? And then they go, Dean, oh, he cut! It was such an amazing experience to work with him.
Thanks, man. Feelings mutual.